Welcome back, everybody, for another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy ARDOIN. Back with me, we were off last week, Julio Vela. Did you survive the flood?
Surfed it through, waked it out, didn't get too wet.
Yeah. We chose to err on the side of caution and forego a show last week. Didn't want to have any troubles getting out of here, so.
Pearland got it pretty hard. Missouri City got it pretty hard.
Yeah.
The Sugar Land area got it pretty hard.
Yeah, Fort Bend got it pretty hard, for sure.
Courts closed, and they reset everybody
And the schools
today.
closed.
And the schools.
And then the Friday after, of course, was a big nothing burger.
Right, right. I got a lot of work done, though.
Did you?
Did you have last Friday off? County employees off on Friday, I thought, because of the rain?
No, kind of got to introduce him first, dude.
Yeah.
Well, the one, the only.
Dr. Peter Stout with us this week.
You're like the guy.
I know, but you guys asking him questions before we even introduce him? Like, come on, man.
Happy to be here. I was flying
Dr.
back.
Stout.
Jumping ahead.
I was flying back from Philadelphia that night, so.
What are you doing out there?
I was at the Quattrone Center, speaking to the Quattrone Center about rapid DNA stuff is what I was doing.
Rapid DNA in the sense of we need this blood tested now. Give us the ratios and results.
Right.
Really?
Right.
Does Houston have the technology and equipment to do that?
So, yeah, there's been, and I've actually been in the media a couple of times about rapid DNA stuff because we've done a pilot here. HPD did a pilot using rapid DNA to see how it could be used with casework. They are technologies I think there's a lot of promise in. I mean, the ability to get a DNA profile in 90 minutes, obviously that's a huge plus, but it all depends on how they're used.
You say 90 minutes. That to me sounds like a quickness in the sense of I'm still thinking of like RoboCop in the 90s and 80s where that DNA testing would take 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
Is that something, I mean, you say 90 minute rapid, I mean, it's called rapid DNA
it's rapid.
testing. So, I mean, how does that differ from,
It
is it that much more rapid?
Well, it is the same kind of chemistries we use in the lab. It's miniaturized down. It's configured in such a way to run that quickly. It's really configured around single source, large quantity DNA samples, so buccal swabs. And they don't deal terribly well with mixtures. It's not as sensitive as what we do in the lab, but it is quick. So nationwide, the intent is to use these as arrestee offender samples in booking stations, is what National CODIS and all that's designed for. And there's a few efforts, Kentucky, there's a township in Pennsylvania that has been trying to use it for more case-related evidence.
90 minutes, though.
Well, so
I mean, that's like the Domino's pizza of DNA delivery.
Well,
you know?
it's you know, the box can do okay. The issues I have with it is less about the box and it's more around, it's all the stuff around the box. Because the box.
Is this like what they use for those 23andMe things?
No, that's different still. That's different still. Yeah.
Down at NRG Stadium and stuff.
Yeah, that's different.
Give us your DNA. Like, why the hell would you do that?
No,
that's a whole nother.
But these
topic.
things, they consume the swab that's put in there. They consume the whole thing. So there's no retesting the swab that went into it, which makes you nervous. They are, it's a legit chemistry, but they aren't as sensitive. So if you've got a low quantity of DNA, trace blood or something like that, and you put it in there, you're likely to consume what was there and you might not get an answer. They don't handle mixtures well. And so the things I've seen issues with around them are the handling of the evidence, because if that's screwed up, it's screwed up.
Yeah.
But then also, how do you store the data? How do you report this stuff? Are the results disclosed? They don't report statistics. How do you know the box is
they don't
calibrated?
Report statistics.
Yeah,
How's
the
it even
reports.
validated?
Well, so these things aren't designed to go into CODIS.
Oh.
The idea is this investigative tool. Well, yes, and there's investigative value, but the ultimate choice of what's going to end up in court isn't my choice.
What's the investigative value? I mean, are you trying to get a preliminary hit for probable cause or something?
Some of that, yeah. That's kind of the idea, and that's certainly what they're marketed as.
Yeah.
Or they're also marketed as, and the companies, there's only two flavors of these things, but the companies that sell them, one, they're very aggressive in their marketing, which always worries me. But They also market them as a way of excluding those that shouldn't be part of the investigation. So you obviously are not part of this. We don't want to trouble you with the investigation. So provide me a swab and we can
The
make sure that
deluxe
you're excluded.
package.
Yeah.
So, 3 questions. One, who are these companies, and are they public or are they private? Do you know?
It's 2 companies. One is called Ande, A-N-D-E, and the other was called Intogenics. They're now part of Thermo Fisher, which is a large. That one is publicly traded. I don't think Ande is. I think it's a private company.
Where do you know where they're based out of?
Andy's based out of Boston. Thermo is worldwide. I mean, Thermo's huge.
And they sell would they be called instruments?
They are an instrument, yeah.
And they would sell them, and they quality test them and sell them to counties?
Well, a lot of the effort is targeted towards police agencies. There's a lot of the marketing that they do of this rapid, screening tool that, you can identify your DNA.
What
So the field officer would actually do like a field field sobriety test.
So it's like a breath tech operator. So they just push a button and then it's like DNA.
That's kind of what they market them as. Now, so in Pennsylvania,
There's no chance of operator
I
error
mean,
there.
come on. I mean, does a cell phone interfere with the results?
So Pennsylvania. So the panel I was just on in Pennsylvania, one of the panelists was the police director there in that township, and they've been using this largely for local databasing.
Yeah, information gathering.
Yeah. I think what they've been very careful about is they do blood stains or chewing gum or cigarette butts that you have a high expectation. There's a large quantity of DNA, single source. They have some mechanisms that people can refuse to provide a swab, or they can contact to have their profile removed. On the panel, it was asked when they've got about 26,000 profiles in their local database. And they were asked, how many people have opted to have their profile removed, and basically none have.
What?
Well,
because they don't have computers.
Well, because they'd have to call in.
They'd have to
actually say.
Yeah, they have to do things.
I want to be removed from that once they're in there. So the box itself, I think, may provide reasonable results on single source type DNA. My concerns are all of these things around the box and basically the policies of how they get used.
Okay, so what are the things around the box, and what are some policy concerns that are in view? Yeah.
First and foremost, evidence handling. How do you routinely and robustly ensure that you don't have contamination, that you don't exhaust the sample, because the box is going to consume what goes in it. So how do I maintain that there is evidence that remains for either future testing or additional testing?
Are there standards that I'd imagine that these companies have some sort of protocols and procedures that, 1, 2, 3, 4, this is how you do provide a valid sample, or?
Yeah.
Or is it just their own internal,
It's their own internal. Now, there are a couple of working groups at the national level that are working on more standards for rapid DNA, because we all acknowledge these things have real potential. It is a technology that, it's mature enough that this is going to stay around. So we do need to figure out real methods of how to use these.
Who owns the results?
This is part of, who owns the result of it.
Yeah.
Where do you store the data? How do you secure the data? How does everybody know that this has been run such that it is disclosed to everybody? Where does the report go? What does the report say? Because right now these reports say match, non-match, or possible match, which is language that goes back 25 years in forensics, because we've spent the last 20 years trying to get to a place where the language is more appropriate to the risk involved.
So
we talk about inclusion and exclusion,
right,
and statistics about that, not just match and non-match.
So who owns all the information now?
I think that's a bit of a question.
That's amazing.
Wow, that's a question.
I'm not sure really who owns that information.
Does it
With CODIS, They're very clear rules for me as a CODIS laboratory of what is viable to go into CODIS, what's appropriate, what's allowed, all of those rules around it, things that I have to exclude that I cannot upload into CODIS, all of these rules and around that. Well, for just local databasing that sits outside of CODIS, none of those rules apply. So, I mean, you mentioned 23andMe. That's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, well, that's a private entity.
Because, yeah, there are no constraints around those data. And right now,
people just willing to just walk up in
and
whatever
so many people
sports
have.
stadium and give it away.
So many people have submitted their profiles in 23andMe that with a couple of pieces of information, basically geographic location and year of birth, there are so many profiles in there that even if I have not put my profile in there, I can impute the identity of anyone in the United States.
That's incredible. That's not incredible. That's actually very credible. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So, okay.
We got to back up a little bit. We got to go to the reason why you're here.
Okay, all right. Well,
Yeah, you get me on rapid.
I mean,
You
It's
just jumped into portable DNA tests and everything.
I mean, it's not Minority Report here. This is the real deal.
well, this stuff is coming. We need to learn how to understand how to use it appropriately and responsibly.
I'd like to understand what it's testing, what results it's producing. I mean, you say, I mean, what is it? It's not a gas chromatograph. It's not what type of instrument is it, and what is it actually testing? And then what are the results or
PCR based STR profiles. It has egrams that are part of the data. There's an allele table, a report.
You got alleles.
Right. I mean, it's there. It's software that's then interpreting it, and there's where you start to worry about the box, because there are an awful lot of complexities in the interpretation of it, and I worry about the software.
Well, who owns the software?
That would be the companies.
They're probably selling it to
Yeah, why are they selling it, bro? Come on. God, it's so good.
Well, we're glad to
So
have you
good,
back.
man.
You're a glutton for punishment.
I am.
Third time
I
you've
think
been on
actually
the
it might
show?
be the fourth or fifth time I've been on. I've been here a few times.
Yeah, you have. I mean,
all right.
I'm impressed. You keep coming back for more.
Hopefully people are starting to believe when I say the point of the laboratory is objective, as unbiased as we can, forensic information for everybody.
No, I think we're getting that, and we're glad you're on for fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, dozenth time, whatever it might be. And if you guys out there have any questions for Dr. Peter Stout or us, you can call in. 713-807-1794 is the number. We also have Twitter up at HCCLA_TV, so you can throw us your questions and comments on there to get in on the conversation. But one of the main reasons we had you on here is the big move.
The big move
that you're in the process of doing. We had a show a few months ago where we came out to visit you guys. You were nice enough to let us in your facility, which was at the Houston Police Department headquarters over on Travis, and we got a pretty free run of the place. Got cameras in there. You all can check it out. It's one of the previous episodes. We'll actually, when we put this episode up on YouTube tomorrow, we'll actually put a link below this to the previous episode with where we got the grand tour from y'all, and had a good time. I mean, I had a lot of fun seeing all the guns and everything.
That always seems to be a high point.
The firearm testing was the high point for me. But y'all are in the process of getting out of there. You're almost out. You're moving down to the old KBR building on the south side, southwest side of downtown, and you get your own space. Free from entanglements.
Free from entanglements, exactly.
And perception.
And perceptions. It is.
How's it feel?
It's nice to move into a well-maintained building, and I think anybody that's been in that 1200 Travis building knows it is a tired building that needs a lot of work.
Well, to be fair, the KBR building's a little tired too.
Well, it is. They've done a good job of maintaining it, and
Yeah.
where we're moving in has been.
Oil money helps.
Yeah, oil money helps. Never can complain. What we're moving out of, we've been across 11 different floors in 4 different buildings. So we had space at 1301 Fannin, which we had a lease on to get a little bit more space. We have moved out of that entirely. And then in 1200 Travis, we have had space on 26th floor, 25th, 24th, 20th, and 10th floors. And actually, as of today, we've turned over the 10th, the 20th, part of the 24th, and part of the 25th floor back to HPD. So we moved out of all of those spaces.
How does one man move the entire forensic science center
That's gonna be my question. I was thinking the same thing. Like, you don't just
something
go.
else?
You don't just call the, two college guys to come move.
No.
Yeah, the two men in a truck.
Yeah.
No, this is taken.
What?
This is a lot of logistics, a lot of planning that goes into this. What we've moved so far, because we've taken over space that was KBR office space.
Right.
And then on the 18th floor, and I think we've got some schematics of the 18th floor, that is a complete gut job. Right now it's demolished down to the floor plates.
Oh, wow.
And so that will be all new air handling, all new everything that's getting built in there for the laboratories.
And I remember, like, when we went through some of the equipment we looked at, particularly some of the computers, I mean, you can't just have anybody moving that stuff.
No. So that's the laboratories, so that there's those lab spaces on the 18th floor.
Yeah.
There'll be space down in the basement.
There we go with that.
Yeah, so that's the 18th floor that has all of the various laboratories. Firearms, where they work up the guns, and where the firing range and shooting tank are, that's down in the basement.
Makes
So-
sense.
Which, right now it's on the 24th floor, which has always bothered me. Why you'd put a firing range on the 24th floor. But so now it will be subsurface, below grade, concrete all around it.
Nice. Yeah. It's kind of like, hey, let's put the jury assembly room underneath the ground
Where it
next to the
floods.
bayou, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that is one of the concerns that we've had in this. So that 500 Jefferson building didn't flood in Harvey, didn't flood in Ike, didn't flood in Allison. So it has weathered well there, but it is a concern. And basically, what we would have if we have evidence down there and we've got a storm coming, we'd move the evidence up.
I have this vision of this like truck with like dry ice
Yeah.
and steam, like like kind of floating out, and people in suits bringing down, like not suits, but like the can't touch anything hazmat kind of suit,
Like the scene out of East.
transferring stuff. And I say this because there's some things that you could probably move very simply, but there's other things that can't be.
Well, this is
about
part of what we want people to make sure that everybody's understanding. We are moving. So we move equipment. When we move equipment, and this will be from October, the laboratory should deliver in October. So between October and the end of the calendar year, how we orchestrate moving equipment over, because we will hire contractors, basically hire the companies for this equipment. They will come in and move the equipment. So when they take down the equipment, they verify that it's functioning properly. They move the equipment to the new space, set it up, and then they validate it to manufacturer specs. And then our personnel will do performance checks beyond that before we put anything back on. So that's part of the length of time in the move. And then certainly how we move evidence, that will also be carefully planned out orchestration of what evidence our people would move, what evidence we would transfer back to the property room while we move, and then go from the property room to the new facility.
Right.
How we orchestrate that we don't compromise evidence in the process of moving things.
I mean, we can all see the scenario of a defense attorney going after the vial that happened to fall out when you're moving it from one cabinet to the storage facility.
Now, some of it, we've got accreditations for both the laboratory side, which is ISO 17025, and that's under ANAB, ANAB. And then we have an accreditation under the International, IAP, International Association of Property and Evidence. That is our evidence handling within the laboratory. So we have requirements with both of those as we move. We have to do that in concert with the accreditations, and we have to meet guidance from the accreditations. So that goes from everything of demonstrating before we move evidence into a place that it's sufficient for the evidence handling. Once we've moved it over there, demonstrating that it's been moved over there, inventory of evidence as it's moved, and it's files too. But then also things on reporting that and so people will see this for a while, that you may have a report that says the report was generated at one address, but the work was done at another address. Because, so like right now,
Right.
I've got, now as of last week, I've got DNA analysts, so the people that are writing the reports that are over in the Jefferson building, but the laboratory is still in the Travis building. So the report will say that the laboratory work was done at Travis, but the report would be issued from 500 Jefferson, which is now the corporate headquarters, because we moved, the corporate headquarters address has moved to 500 Jefferson.
What's the downtime between,
Yeah.
you know, for everything? Like how long before you're up and running? I guess that's why you're doing it piecemeal, so you're not having the whole thing down.
There
at one
is
time. But what's the stages and?
Depends on the different disciplines. So biology, we figure we probably will be in that transition for about 3 weeks.
Oh.
And so what we're planning to do is in that month that we're moving the biology lab, we will outsource some of that work so that it doesn't get delayed or stacked up or just wait a month.
Where would you
while we
outsource
move.
it to?
Probably Bodie.
What does that mean?
That Bodie Labs is a commercial DNA laboratory that we've used. Basically, everybody in the country uses Bodie. Now, the reason for that is we've got to move the equipment for biology. We have contemplated, do we move half of it, validate it, move the work, then move the other half? The problem in biology is once we move the equipment over there, we've got to go through decontaminating everything and then
It's so
demonstrating
awesome.
that it's decontaminated.
That's awesome. This guy, you have to set up the lab. No, really, he has to set up the lab. That's so awesome.
But it's not just simply move it, validate it. We have to demonstrate that it
Right.
has been decontaminated, that we can reliably work without things being contaminated. So do that once, not do it
Right.
twice.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
How's the morale with your group, your team, the team that makes up the army of soldiers that you have?
The 200 people that we're
right.
moving.
I think it's like 200. I didn't want to.
Yeah, we're 200 employees, so we've got 130 people in the Jefferson building now. So the moves to date they've been basically office moves, but we've got a moving company that comes in, we deliver the crates that they pack in on a Tuesday, they pack up their offices between Tuesday and Thursday. Thursday, the moving company comes in, then overnight Thursday, they move all of that from one building to the Jefferson building. IT comes in on Thursday night into Friday, sets up computers, and then when office staff comes back in, or the staff comes back on Monday, they unpack and go.
How many of the 200 or say are like scientists versus staff versus IT? What's your breakdown on that?
Trying to think through. So, of our budget, 75% of our entire budget is staff. I mean, that is by far and away our largest single budget line. We have 100, it's not quite 100, it's about 90 licensed analysts, so under state licensure. And state licensure only applies to the disciplines that are required by Texas law to be accredited.
What would those be?
Biology, toxicology, controlled substances, firearms, and trace, but we don't do any trace. So crime scene, latent prints, multimedia aren't required to be licensed, and right now they can't be licensed. There's no mechanism to license them in the state. So out of those, it's about 90 licensed staff, and then we've got another 30 that are in crime scene, another 8 in multimedia, and 17 in latent prints. So the majority of staff is analyst, or I lump quality personnel in with basically the laboratory side. I mean, the lab quality is the core of the lab. So while they're not doing casework, they support everything about casework. Our client services group is the ones that are handling the evidence into the laboratory. They're handling all the records. So I put them in with that as well, even though they're not doing casework and stuff with test tubes. So, actual like administrative support staff is fairly small. It really only represents about 12-ish% of the budget, are the IT and HR and executive staff, things like that.
What do you think this move is going to do what do you see? What are you trying to? What do you think the results are going to be from that? Better efficiency. Are you going to be able to take in a more variety of cases? Or are you going to be able to communicate better? What are the benefits from this? I mean, obviously, being in one central location and being a hub, but I mean,
first and foremost is a facility that's actually designed to be a lab. I mean, right now the lab spaces are retrofitted into office configurations.
Got
So
another picture up.
air handler. So that is a rendering of what the toxicology lab will look like.
that's so
Part of it.
cool.
That looks more
That's
like
so
a lab
cool.
than what
It
we
looks
saw.
a little more like a lab than what
Yeah.
you saw right now.
I mean, that
Yeah.
looks like what you see on TV and in the
Yeah.
movies.
And actually, I think those renderings are probably pretty accurate
accurate,
because that's
yeah.
based off of the furniture that we're
That's so cool.
procuring for it. And
Looks like Skynet.
It does. It's like this, and you designed this, and you went through floor by floor. I'd imagine because you're that meticulous that you went floor by floor, thinking, okay, on this floor we're gonna have this type of lab. This is the staff. We're gonna have biology here and firearms there.
Yep.
What did you have a team? Was there like this move team that you put together with? And
So we've got an architect firm that we've been working with. Actually, we have two architect firms. There's an architect firm that is the building, and then I've got another architect that's basically a cross-check on the first architect. And then we've had a lot of staff involved with it because these are the folks that have to work in it.
Yeah.
I mean, they know best how they need to work with it. There's a lot of staff involved in it. And then Charles Evans, who is, we call him Director of Business Development, but really Charles has been the project manager over this. And Charles has been a godsend.
is that something that is that a hire? Is that a year hire? Or?
He is a part of our staff.
Hold on. You have a director of business
Well,
development? I mean, don't
it's
y'all
kind
kind of
of
have
a-
a captured market?
Yeah, well, like I say, we call him that because I don't think we got a better title for it. But I mean, really, what Charles has been doing now for 2 years is building because Charles and I've in the process of getting to this. I think we looked at 60 different buildings.
60.
All over the metro area.
Jeez.
All kinds of different configurations, all kinds of possibilities. How could we do this? How could we create a concept for this that we can get into the budget? Because that's basically how we got to this. Was this rather than the classical laboratory where you do a bond issue and then you go build a new building and you spend 10 years getting there and you spend tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars doing it. Nobody was ever going to give us that. I don't have 10 years. We were dying in the building that we were in. So the idea is if we could come up with a solution that fits inside of the lease payments that we were making on all of the buildings, basically it becomes cost neutral to the city year over year. So one building we looked at, it started to dawn on me that the base lease was low enough that you could capitalize the build of it in between and then have a lease payment that would be what we pay every year. And so that's what we found is the builder's the one that's capitalizing all the build. They're amortizing that over a 30-year lease. And then any year within that, it basically fits in what we've been paying for lease.
How does it compare to other major cities in the country?
Well, like I say, the classical way of building a laboratory is like what Washington, D.C. did or others. I mean, it is a new built building.
They bulldoze something down and build something up?
Yep, basically.
It's a lot of money.
Well, it's a lot of money, but it's also a lot of time.
Yeah.
And, it would be marvelous, but I worry just as much about overbuilding as underbuilding.
Sure.
Because there's more automation, there's more software automation, instrumentation is getting smaller. The footprint of the laboratory 10 years from now, in that same footprint, we probably can do more cases in that same footprint. So out of the about 80-ish thousand square feet that we had between all of those buildings, we really were only using about 50,000 well.
Sure.
Because it was all, it grew into this, well, we got this little office space, let's put a few nerds in there, and we got this closet over here, let's shove a couple nerds in there. Very broken up space. Places we just couldn't use at the same time we had people sitting on top of each other. So this is 84,000 square feet, well designed. And no, it's not luxurious. I mean, they're large, I think, nice cubicles.
Do you think your lab, it's so freaking awesome, it's his lab. Do you think your lab compares to, I mean, you mentioned Washington, D.C., you didn't mention anybody else, but you put your lab up against the rest of them?
Yeah, because the building's only part of
Right.
the picture.
Uh-huh.
We've come to where we're at in crap facility. It's
Yep.
not the lab. It's the people and the process in the lab.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I mean, more than anything, it's the people that you hire and making
Right.
sure that you have quality controls in place,
Right.
which
And it's the
we haven't had
processes that you
before.
put around it.
Yeah.
And that's what makes the lab.
And that's the thing that I feel like we've been lacking before here is just somebody to actually bring some leadership to the lab and put quality controls in place and bring in quality people that are going to.
I think we've made a lot of progress. I mean, there's still things to do, and we can't.
I think you're light years ahead of where we were.
Well, I appreciate that.
This is a
I
legacy.
appreciate
This is legacy.
that. Well, I appreciate that.
I mean,
How much have you resolved kind of the backup on the rape kits and that sort of stuff? Where are we
So
with that?
we're in pretty good shape. We're on the plan that we set out. Actually, sexual assault kits, I don't think we've got anything. I can look at the dashboard here. One, we replaced all the networking. We've gotten all of the data management systems replaced. Biology will be the last one to move into the new limbs, but we were waiting until we got done with getting the last of this backlog done before we shift that. Plus, we're also standing up SDR-Mix, which is the probabilistic genotyping tool.
Yep.
We'll stand that up here at the end of the summer. So there's a lot of stuff going on in biology. We'll move them into the new limbs after we get done with some of that.
How do you? Well, finish your thought.
But
Before I interrupt you.
all of these things, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Sorry.
let's talk about how's communication amongst the agencies that are submitting requests.
I think we've made some good improvements there. There certainly are always places where how we get that information to move back and forth between HPD, between us and HCDAO, keep working on improving it, but with that LIMS, we made a completely new user portal, basically where they make requests.
What agencies do our service to what agencies and what requests are you getting from where?
The vast majority of evidence that we get is HPD. I mean, they're
Sure.
the single largest law enforcement agency in the state. They will always be the vast majority of the stuff we get. We've been doing some cases for Austin. We've got Deer Park, Sanjak County. There's a few smaller ones. And I don't know, we'll see with the legislative session. There's a number of bills that change a lot of things for labs, and we may see the landscape change.
Do these municipalities buy into or have to sponsor or pay into being able to use your lab?
Yeah, I mean, they pay for the work that we do for them.
And do they bid, or do you have a? Is it
Just give them a price sheet.
right? I mean, here it
We
is.
give them a price sheet.
It's like a
You know,
menu.
yeah, and what we try to do is target
DNA test, $9.99.
Yeah, we're covering our
Yeah.
costs that are in it, plus costs of equipment and things like that. And I haven't really pursued a lot of this because we need to get Houston's work straight
Yeah,
first.
for sure.
And I think we're close. Like we're saying, by this fall, the backlog should be gone. I think by about the first of the year,
Yeah.
everything's going to be under 30 days sustainably.
Wow, that's amazing.
How do you feel about the DA's electronic discovery portal? How do you feel that y'all are working with that? And is it still a work in progress?
Yeah.
From the way you see it?
We send. Right now, we basically email reports. I don't really do a whole lot with their discovery portal. We've got all the stuff that we put up on our website of all kind of the stuff in between, all the procedures.
So
and the
you don't have a
validations.
direct link to the
I don't have a
DAs.
direct link to that. Now, one of the things that we have been talking is how we get reports to the DAs better and how they're able to pull reports better.
Mm-hmm.
We've moved all of our LIMS into an Azure cloud deployment, which helps we've got an interconnection with HPD that allows HPD officers with their credentials to be able to access this portal, this user interface, that they can make requests at. So they don't have access into the systems, but using their credentials, they can get access to this portal. We've not been able to do that yet with the DA's office because the county is still working at getting their Azure deployments in place. Until the county gets there, the DAs really can't get there.
Well, I heard the DA's office is crumbling from the inside.
I send them reports.
That's what I heard, man. That's what I heard. Tell Tom Berg resigned.
He did. Well, or fired, depending on what you...
Man, I don't know.
Depending on
Maybe
what
they
you
get their
read.
act together. They can communicate over here with Dr. Stout.
Do you think, have you been asking for a direct link that you can just upload straight into their portal? So instead of having, because I mean, always the concern with email is that somebody
something gets
doesn't
lost.
see it.
Yeah, something gets lost.
You know,
And
I mean,
that's,
we from the defense lawyer side, we still have questions about whose email do we even put on service of pleadings
Yeah.
that we file. You know, and everybody's just basically been putting Kim Ogg's email address because she is the DA. But I would imagine you just can't send everything to Kim Ogg's email address.
And, you know, we deal at a point where a lot of cases don't even have an ADA involved yet.
Right.
So most of our reporting is back to HPD investigators, becomes part of that case file, and then moves on. What I see a lot of, and would be very helpful, is I get a lot of requests from ADAs now asking for reports on cases that they have now been assigned to. And yeah, it would be, I would really like to be in a place where I can have these reports in our portal, that they would have access to the portal and they can just pull.
Right.
And that's what I'd like to get. They don't have the access yet to be able to do that. We're still working. This is one of the places that I'm working with the developer of our limbs
Yeah.
to be able to push reports to the portal. Now we have set up with HPD that we have a mechanism that our reports can go out and they go into HPD's RMS system associated with the case, so it's much easier for the officers to find, and also ensures that our report is associated with the case, regardless of what officer is assigned. Because officers change, and we've had issues with that. If officer gets reassigned,
I mean, look, everybody's got turnover. HPD
Oh, yeah.
has turnover. The
Yep.
DA's office has turnover. I mean,
How's your
that's the
turnover been?
problem.
our turnover rate, we track our turnover rate. Our voluntary turnover rate right now is about 4%.
Easy. Yeah,
So, you know, it's something that we keep an eye on. You know, we've had points where it's been higher.
sure.
We've had points where, you know, we've made it higher because we've needed to shift people.
Well, as far as 200 and so individuals who are part of this team, nationwide, how does that rank as far as number of people?
So if you look at Bureau of Justice Statistics, Census of Publicly Funded Crime Labs, which is kind of, it's not a perfect survey, but it's kind of the best global survey of crime labs that's out there. 411 crime laboratories, and it's 2014 data, because here 2019, they do it every 5 years, so 2019 is a collection year. In 2014, of those 411 crime labs, half of those crime labs had fewer than 24 employees. A quarter of them have less than 9. There's only 27 labs in the country in 2014 that had more than 100 employees. So at 200 employees, I can't say we're one of the top 3, but we have to be in the top 3 or 4 largest labs in the country.
What are some of the reasons people, that from your standpoint, in trying to prevent turnover, and what are some of the reasons that people might leave? I mean,
I'd take a CSI job in Las Vegas. So I'm gonna go.
You know, it's easy to say it's pay because
Yeah.
you know, forensics has been a notoriously undercompensated field for years. I think it's more complicated than that because the people I see come into forensics, the people that I want to try and hire in forensics, they have a commitment to the civil service aspect of this. They get into it because of the capacity to do something to improve justice. And so because they come in for that, pay is not the first and foremost reason they do it.
Right.
But it's a high stress job. I mean, there's scrutiny from everybody. Everybody second guesses. They screw something up, you know, they put their career on the line every time they testify, every time they do something, because if they screw something up, it tends to stick.
Is there a national database for quality control of analysts? So, for example, I can I can track if I know a police officer went from precinct X to precinct Y and then to precinct J. I can pull that record and then if it's all within the same year or a couple years, I'm going to say, well, we might have an issue. Is there a database or quality control in tracking analysts? Just the same way they track lawyers or doctors or anyone else?
No, not
Interesting.
nationally. Keep in mind, nationally, Texas is not unique, but it certainly is in a small group of states that legislatively requires certification of licensure of personnel. That just started this year, and accreditation of the laboratory. Most states don't require either.
Really?
You're telling me I could no accreditation and no licensure?
Right.
Man.
Not a legal requirement.
JV's crawfish and CSI.
Pretty much.
That's
Now,
amazing.
Like, I think last numbers I saw, about close to 90% of those publicly funded crime labs are accredited.
Sure. Well, I mean,
But it's a voluntary accreditation, so they're always struggling with resources to maintain the accreditation. So this is in part why the accreditation cycles for laboratories are on-site visits come once every 4 years, which I've always questioned on that. When I lived in North Carolina, I always used the example, because in North Carolina, the restaurant inspection was a grade, A, B, C, and a restaurant could say in business down to a C minus. And so my example to people was, okay, you go to a new barbecue restaurant, and you walk in, you see a C minus on the wall, you gonna stay and try out the potato salad?
No, you're not.
No.
And so that's...
And for accreditation in laboratories, when you see that accreditation certificate on the wall, what you know is that lab got at least a C minus, and that's all you know.
that's terrible.
Well, from that standpoint, though, I mean, you talk about the type of people that come to work in these labs, and I mean, they seem, obviously, I mean, just like every profession, you got some bad apples and some people who are not worth it. But I think for the most part, you have people who are very dedicated to science,
Yes.
who are very serious about
Yes.
their job. Like you said, I mean, they take everything very seriously, because one screw up could affect them down the road at some point and really cost them potentially
career.
hundreds of thousands of jobs and dollars in compensation down the road at some point.
Yep.
So to that degree, why do you think there has not been more of an outcry amongst your community to require accreditation?
Oh, I think within the forensic community, there has been. And within the forensic community, because really it's been the forensic community that has pushed for the OSACs, the Organization of Scientific Area Committees. It's been for 20, 30 years, it's been the forensic practitioners that have self-assembled into groups to try and establish best practices and recommendations for best practices. It's not typically been outside pressure that's done it. I think, I mean, I've been in this game for 20-something years now, and when I look at, so back in 2009 when the NASA report came out, and one of those recommendations was the separation of laboratories from either police agencies or prosecution. And at that point, certainly I towed the, party line, if you will, that it's not necessarily who they report to, it's about all the structures and things like that. But really, and this isn't a comment on something police do wrong, but police are police, they're not scientists.
Yeah.
That's correct. That's right.
And
right.
police have to prioritize things for public safety and cruisers and body armor and things. They have to prioritize that. So when the laboratory is part of that, the laboratory is going to be starved.
Yeah.
It's not the priority. So as long as laboratory sits inside of that,
Is your
That was my alarm.
your crawfish ready?
yeah,
That's terrible.
you
Pardon.
gotta
Pardon. Excuse me.
Did you get a
Sorry.
cake bacon in the oven?
they've been good crawfish.
Yeah, no, that's terrible. This was amazing, and then just interrupted this. But yes, the lab starves.
Right.
In the event that, because we will always put human safety, people safety.
Yeah, and you have to.
Well, and the
That's
reality
not
is just
wrong.
that law enforcement, the police union is a better organized lobbying group than scientists.
There's that, yeah. I mean, scientists, there are 14,000 people that work in publicly funded crime labs.
Yeah.
Forensic science is this big.
Yeah.
This much impact, but it's this big.
Right.
So yeah, we've not, and forensic scientists,
You don't need to hire like a PR firm
yeah, well,
to get out there and
Well, and it's a ton of education to.
it is.
Messages.
It
It's
is.
a ton of
It is.
education to.
And most
to get-
certainly, us scientists, we have not been particularly good about going out there and explaining. You know, I joke that the scientists are just as scared of the lawyers as the lawyers are of the scientists. But, you know, it is incumbent on us to go help explain, to go make the case for, you know, this stuff is really important. You put $1 with a crime lab, you get a lot of dollars out in the whole system.
for sure.
So yeah, the example I use. So George Rodriguez exoneration. That resulted in his civil liberties claim against the city. I think the original settlement in it was like $9 million. I know it got negotiated down, but that originated from a lab error. Obviously, there were more errors that had to happen in between for him to be wrongfully convicted, but one lab error equals $9 million.
Yeah.
I do 30,000 requests a year. So straight line calculation of risk, that means our lab every year is $300 billion worth of potential risk.
Mm-hmm.
But it also means that if I don't get a result out quickly enough, so I've got a couple studies that I cite that try to estimate the cost of crimes to the community around, and they estimate that a homicide is like $5 million, a sexual assault is like $500,000, and a burglary is like $40,000.
In terms of the resources it takes to investigate.
Right. So that's, you know, investigation costs and incarceration and lost wages and all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So you think I get 1,200 rape kits a year, 55 rape kits, so changing in the city of Houston, 55 fewer sexual assaults would pay for the lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the lab budget, you know, our lab budget kind of is around $25 million. That's a $25 million hedge against $300 billion worth of risk.
You better make sure you do it right.
You better make sure you do it right. But also the fact that, you know, $1 you put there is an insurance policy against an enormous amount of risk.
Yeah.
That's right.
To the lab.
I mean, you just want to get it
To
right.
the lab.
Right.
Well,
That's
and-
amazing.
But it
Just
has to be
from-
both right and in a timely fashion. Because if I give you a right answer 2 years from now,
No,
that doesn't do any good.
I agree. I mean, you have to spend to have the resources to make it, like you said, in a timely fashion and make it accurate. I mean, that's the only way the system works.
So you look at, again, that Bureau of Justice Statistics report, because the total budget of all those 400 laboratories across the country was about $1.4 billion in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
In that, they did I think it was like 4.7 million requests. But basically, if you take, I kind of forget the numbers, but if you divide it out just back of the envelope, it comes out to about $400 a case. On average across the country is what's funded. $400 a case. So I used to be in the commercial sector as a toxicologist. I didn't get paid this, I wish I did, but the company billed my time out at $350 an hour. So, and that $400 that the crime lab has is receiving the sample, analyzing the sample, storing the sample, testifying about the sample, reporting about it, everything.
Right.
In
Where does the money
$400.
come from? Is it privately funded? Is it taxpayer funded? Is
For
it
which?
a
For
hybrid of
crime
both?
labs? For crime labs, these are publicly funded, so it's either municipality or county, federal level.
At least here in Houston or Harris County, it's controlled by the Commissioner's Court.
So for us,
It's city.
I'm city. So
City,
I go
pardon.
to my board to approve a budget for HFSC, and then that budget goes to city council and becomes part of the city's budget.
How concerned are you given this latest budget fight with the
Prop B?
firefighters,
Yeah.
Prop B,
I'm very
and-
concerned.
And the
It's a concern to
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
I mean, how much are you going to have to? I mean, look, I think it's a political mess for the mayor. Let's set that aside for a second. But I think it also shows what a mess the city's budget's in, and so
I'm glad I don't have to try and solve that problem.
yeah. But you're
But yes, I do worry about that. I've got 200 people that bust their butts every day trying to do it right.
Right.
I think we've made marvelous progress on stuff. I understand the enormous pressures that the city has to deal with.
I
but
just am concerned the flippancy at which he laid off the firefighters. You know, I mean, at what point could he say, I'm going to lay off 150 people from the crime lab.
No way.
Well, that's more difficult because HFSC is a separate corporate entity from the city.
Okay.
So, you know, I
So
report.
he wouldn't have control over that.
Not directly, no.
Okay.
I mean, what would be the mechanism is year over year in that budget, if that budget were to be substantially cut. But, you know, that's so far, we've actually fared better than a lot of the components of the city.
Sure.
I think it does point to, I think there is a good understanding in the mayor's office of the importance of what this is.
Well, and I think it also contributes to the overall goal of a fair and just system. I mean, the better crime lab we have, the better resources we have, the better individuals that are looking at things that are collected to be used against individuals to be put in prison or to be prosecuted against.
Well, and
Well,
I'll
we're
be the
just-
first to say, laboratories can be more efficient. I think we've
Yeah.
demonstrated, because our budget's been flat for 3 years now. But we've still managed to reduce backlogs. We have improved quality. I would argue dramatically. We've made the process more efficient, and we've done it in the same cost. Obviously, we've been able to get more efficient.
Well, and we were talking before we started the show that y'all did the forensics on the Harding Street incident, and y'all have already turned in your results.
Yep.
You've already turned in the summary of your investigation. So, I mean, from where I sit, I mean, I feel like that's a pretty important case.
Yep.
Needs to be decided pretty quickly. Sounds like y'all got in and got out and made it efficient. So
I think we've done a reasonable job there. I think but you know, that's not the only important case out there.
no, but I mean, it's obviously it's a case that's gotten a lot of media
yeah.
attention, and so I mean, I guess that kind of puts a little red flag in the system, like, hey, we might want to get this one done.
Well,
a
there
little
is
sooner.
that, but this is one of the problems, and this is across all laboratories in the country, and it's something that I think we as scientists, we tend to downplay because we just need to go figure out how to get this done. But when you have backlogs and you have this zero-sum game of the resources,
Yeah.
you force the laboratory into choosing, okay, which heinous crime do I prioritize? Do I prioritize the triple rape over the double homicide, quadruple homicide? You know, tell me which one comes first.
And do you guys have to prioritize that, or do you take direction from the DA's office and HPD when it comes to prioritizing certain cases?
It's a negotiation. Crimes against person, and this is fairly consistent across the country, but certainly here, crimes against person, those are first.
Yeah.
Within crimes against person, it is it's a question. And I think some of that does fall to the priorities of the case, what's going to trial. Mercifully, we don't have some of the same backlogs that others do. So I have less of this choice to make than others. But then it's basically property crime is after.
How do you feel the negotiations have kind of changed given the current status of the courts and the DA's office being displaced? I mean, because the flow of the cases is different.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're not being prioritized necessarily by. The priority seems to be not necessarily what type of case or anything like that. It's who can get a courtroom space to try it.
Yeah.
To try it in.
Yeah.
Which judge? Which DA? Where do we have a trial? I mean, that seems to be right. What's driving the priority?
Yeah, and when you've got prioritization that is driven by all those other things, it is less of an issue for us now. And again, because we are in, nationally speaking, a really advantageous position that we don't have big backlogs. But that drives a lot of last-minute requests. And last-minute requests are more prone to error, there's risk, it disrupts all the rest of the work. Anything we can do to diminish last-minute requests is great. But when, the DA's office is basically fighting for where do you put this, they don't have a choice.
How do you move your entire lab and still not skip a beat?
We're good.
The guy's moving the entire lab. And you're still not missing. And
we will have places where things slow down. Toxicology, honestly, is one of my concerns.
Okay.
And toxicology has been a growing concern because we are seeing far more cases come in toxicology. Basically, the number of toxicology cases we're getting has doubled in the last 2 years.
What are some types of cases that with toxicology have been involved?
So in the crime lab, toxicology means driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol and drug-facilitated sexual assault cases. So you've got
Which ones have increased?
the DUID.
Really?
And it has gone way up.
'Cause see, I mean, you hear stories about Uber and everything else being cutting into it, but
So I think some of that is, I think HPD is probably doing more interdiction.
but the number
Population size has increased. Now, a trend, and again, I've been in the media some about this one, and this is one that I've been trying to get people to pay attention to. We are seeing, and we're working on a publication right now to get this out, a dramatic shift in drunk driving, fewer drunk drivers and more drugged drivers.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a shift to samples that have little or no alcohol in them, but more drugs.
So-
and fewer alcohols. And this is more than just the whole shift in the numbers. This is about a 5-fold shift in the proportion.
So, so I ask, I had a assistant district attorney tell me today, oh, well, if it comes back with no alcohol or little alcohol, it's automatically sent back to the lab for tox.
Yes.
Is that, it's an automatic kind of deal? Or?
Basically, across the whole state, if we've got a 0.1 or above, we don't test for drugs.
Okay.
Across the whole state, actually probably across most of the country. Below a 0.1, we will typically run for drugs. Now, we'll run drugs if there's a fatality or something like that, or it's requested.
Sure.
But, so we lose all of that information of what the drug population looks like with alcohol, and I know there's a lot of drugs there, but none of us have the resources to be able to test all of that. Now, this shift really worries me because testing for drugs is much more complex than testing for alcohol.
Yeah.
Trying drug cases is much more complex than alcohol, and nobody's equipped for that.
Yeah, and especially if you don't, and we got 30 seconds left, guys, especially if you don't have an officer that's equipped as a drug recognition expert from the scene.
No DRE.
Yeah.
No DRE.
That's interesting. I mean, so that's just something that's, I mean, the statistics, I would just love to see your statistical analysis on stuff.
Come on down.
Do y'all test for LSD?
No, well, I mean,
Because that's been popping around. I'm getting a lot of calls.
we don't routinely look for LSD.
Could you?
We could.
That's awesome.
Good. Well, so we got to wrap it up.
Yeah.
How do you want to close it? What do you got to say?
Dr. Stout, it's always a pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Is your cake done?
I will nerd out with you any day of the week.
I'm happy to come back whenever y'all want me.
We do appreciate you coming on. We will definitely, and we want to come check out the new digs.
Yep.
When you're ready, we would like to come back.
So about October.
Okay.
About October.
Fair enough.
All right.
Let's make it late October. I got a trial in Austin I got to get through. So that's all the time we have for this week, ladies and gentlemen. Julio's going to go home and make sure his cake is ready to eat. And you going to do that alarm again next week?
Did I make a cake? Oh, the alarm. It's total rude. Sorry.
All right.
It was actually the alarm to make sure I got here on time, but I put it at 8:15.
We are off next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new show, but that's all the time we have for tonight. So we'll see you in a couple weeks. Good night.